Hey developers, today we're going to talk about Gridsome, which is a Vue-powered static site generator. This actually might sound familiar if you've heard of Gatsby, so make sure you stay all the way to the end and learn all about this technology. And by the way, this video is sponsored by my course, Create Awesome Vue.js Apps with Nuxt.js. So if you haven't checked it out, click on the link in the description below. Basically, it's a 2-in-1 course where I teach you all about Vue.js and all about something really cool called Nuxt.js. So it's a must-have, it's a must-learn. So check it out. It's in the description below. All right, so let's take a look at this Gridsome. So right now, let me just tell you guys, it is really new. It's version 0.4.3, so it's not even in beta yet. So there is going to be some bugs. It may not be 100% production ready, but they are really working on it hard. I've seen a lot of pull requests coming. In fact, here's the GitHub for it. You can take a look here. They have 45 issues. They have 16 pull requests. The pulse of the organization and what they're doing is great, so I would not worry about it. In fact, if we take a look, we can look at the contributors here. We can look at the pulse. You see they already have had 8 active pull requests. They merged 3 just in this last week. They've been closing issues, so it's definitely under active development. There's a lot of cool stuff happening with it, and I think it's gaining a lot more momentum. But I would say this is going to kind of be a preview of it and what it can do right now, but they are working on it, and it doesn't have everything. Now, if you have heard of Gridsome, you probably heard of, or if you're interested in Gridsome, you probably heard of Gatsby, which is a way you can use React to create really cool modern websites. It uses GraphQL, as does Gridsome. They also have some other similarities. They both have plugins, and they both have this progressive web app kind of idea. Now, if you look at the bottom of GitHub here, so as of this recording, this is what they've accomplished. They do have the GraphQL layer. They do have pages and templates. You can do multi-processing image processing. They have pagination, and they have that plugin API. But they haven't gotten like the service worker, so you're not going to really quite get a progressive web app out of it. If you don't know what that means, don't worry. We'll talk about that at a different time. They don't really have guides or tests involved, so they definitely are still striving for this 1.0 roadmap. So it is a work in progress, I should say. So let's go ahead and run this and take a look at it and see if we can to see how it works. So I have Visual Studio Code open here, and I have my bash prompt. So to get started, what you need to do is install it. And so you can use yarn or npm. I use npm still, but I do npm install -- global at gridsome/CLI, and that'll go ahead and install it for us. And this will just take a few moments. Okay, so after it's created, after it's installed, I should say, now you'll be able to run Gridsome directly from the command line here. So to do that, and just as it says here in the documentation, you can do Gridsome create my Gridsome site. So let's try to do that. So we'll type Gridsome create my grid site 1. And that'll go ahead and create it. And you can see here it's cloning the starter default and updating the project, installing the dependencies all in one. Okay, great. It went ahead and installed for us. So it basically installed the site and boilerplate for us. So if we go to our site, now we have 2 options, Gridsome develop and Gridsome build. So I can also go Gridsome develop and then do -h at the end. Actually, Gridsome --help says you can do some commands and put --help at the end. So we'll try that. And that tells us that we can run different ports and a host if we want, but we'll just let it default to 8080. So we'll just do Gridsome develop, and that should bring up our local server here. We can also build it if we wanted to. All right, so now you can see here we have 2 sites running, and just like Gatsby, which I'm going to keep referring throughout this video since it's very similar, we actually have a GraphQL Explorer. So we'll look at that in a second, but let's take a look at just the site running. Our localhost 8080. You see here, not too crazy, but you see a hello world, the lorem ipsum, a big symbol. Now, if we look inside our folder here, inside our Visual Studio, this is the directory structure that it created. So I'll go and make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So we have these component folder, we have layouts, so we have this default layout here. We have pages. So this might look a little familiar. If you remember, I did a VuePress video, which was also a static site generator, and it had something similar to this. And then we have templates. And then we have a main.js. So you can see here this main.js file, the import the global CS and Gridsome scripts. It basically loads the layout, the default layout. So if we go to layouts here, here's the default layout that it's loading. And then from this one, see here we have our CSS. We actually have this query, which is our query for our GraphQL, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And you can see here it actually has the static metadata in it that displays everything. So it also has this header, which is our header for it. And then it has the strong links that we have. So let's take a look. This is our home and about. And then if we look inside our about, and here's our index that gets loaded, and this is all our information. So if let's say I delete all this out, hello world, save it. Now you can see hello world, so it's automatically updating pretty quickly there, as we expect, which is great. Now let's go ahead and bring up our GraphQL Explorer. So we can see here we have this other one. So if we go ahead and open it. So here's the GraphQL Explorer, just like you would have in Gatsby. And this is where you can do different GraphQL things. And here's the help here. So we can do all our queries here on the left-hand side. But you can see here, this is what we have available to us. We have this pages, all pages, some metadata. So we can look at, let's say, metadata. If we want, so we can have metadata here, and you can see, click and say metadata of type metadata is a selection of the subfields. So we can have some subfields, and we can pick which one. Let's say site name. So now we went ahead and did a query on the site name. We can see there's nothing there. So this is basically how you write GraphQL for our queries. It looks kind of like JavaScript, but it isn't JavaScript. But you have these brackets here. Basically, you're saying this metadata here. We want what's in the site here. We want site URL, but you can also add in, let's see here, site name. So you run this, you see nothing's returning, but the site name's Gridsome. So it's actually getting it from this Gridsome config file here. Okay, let's see if we can change this and see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and change the Gridsome. I'm going to change it to Erik's site, and we're going to save it. And if you see here, if I just refresh this page and hit play, nothing happens. So let's go ahead and stop and restart the server. So I'm restarting it, and then I'll refresh the page in our GraphQL Explorer, and I've hit play this time. Now you can see now it shows Erik's site, so it's running correctly. So you can see this is how we update it. Now let's take a look at adding data. So one of the great things about Gridsome and Gatsby is that you can take external data and put it into the GraphQL system, and then you can basically do queries on that GraphQL data inside your application. So let me give you an example of that. So first, if you go to the Gridsome website and you click on plugins, you can see this is the plugins they have available at this point. They have Contentful, Dado CMS, Faker, File System, and WordPress. If you look in Gatsby and look at the plugins, there is a lot more. But this is a good start. So this is cool that they were able to do that. So let's take a look at one of them called like Faker. So this actually just generates like fake data. So this might be a little bit more interesting to see in our Explorer, our playground here, than just what we have normally that I showed you earlier. So to add plugins, you just go into the gridsome.config.js file, and then you just add it in here. So we can just do use, and then Gridsome, and then source Faker. And then we use the options here, and this specifies what we want to actually add here. So in this instance, we'll go ahead and add in num nodes, and that tells us how many we want. So we'll just do 50 for now, and we'll save it. And one thing we have to do is we have to make this an object, so we cannot forget to do that. There we go. So we'll save it, and then we need to install it. So to install it, we do an npm install, and then we do gridsome /source figure like this, and that will go ahead and install it. Okay, it's went ahead and it's installed. So now if we clear this out and I'll run our server again, let's see if we see that data being loaded. So you can see it's loading the schema, it's bootstrapping everything, so no errors. So I'll refresh our Explorer here, and we have our metadata, but let's see here. If we hit Control and space, and I believe it's Alt and space on Macs, you get this drop down. It kind of tells you what schemas are already present, so that way you can make some changes to it. You can see here we have the all pages, the metadata, the page, but now we have Faker. So if we look at Faker, we can see now we have thumbnails, emails, avatar. So we can, let's say we do author here, and we hit play. So this one actually is asking us for an ID. So what we could do is there's an all Faker, and from all Faker we can go into edges, and then into node, and then into, let's say we wanted to look at author and email and avatar. Now if we hit play here, you could see now all of a sudden we have all this fake data, which has fake emails, even has this source image, which is really cool that we can bring in. So now we have this data. So let me show you how we can add this data from GraphQL into one of our Vue pages. So let's take a look at the about page that we have right now, and we just have the normal lorem ipsum and the about at the top that we had before. But what we want to do is actually take this and create, grab the information from the GraphQL and display it on the screen. Now, obviously, this is pretty simple what I'm doing. If you look at our site that we have up, in localhost 8080, we don't really have much in here in the about page. If we want to do this for real, let's say our about page is like a form and we wanted to list some more information in it. So I'm going to just delete this about us, and I'm going to call it, instead of about us, I'll just call it email information, which is interesting. But so to actually do a query on this, if we look at the documentation for Gridsome and we go to the docs, you can go into this bottom here that shows querying data. Now this querying data is pretty helpful because we can actually say, well, we actually, in this case, we're in a pages. How do we query data from pages? So if we click pages here, it tells us that we need to use this page query. It kind of looks like a page query component almost, but it's outside the template. So we do this page query, we then have to close it, and then we can put our query in. So if we go back to our playground, we can just take this all Faker query and add it in there. So let's take a look. If we just copy, and I'm just going to copy and paste into the page query at the top here. So this shows us we have the edges node. Now we're grabbing the author, email, and avatar. Now to actually use that in here, so let's do ULI, and what we're going to do is, since we have 50 of them, we want to iterate through that. If you're familiar with Vue.js, you know you can use a v-for directive. And then I'm going to use an item, and I'm going to use index in, and then the syntax you use is this $page. That always starts with $page, and then we basically put what we would have in the query, all Faker and edges. We know that's an array, and just because we don't want any errors here, we're going to include index in here, so that way it iterates through there. We always have to put a key in, and then we're going to put in here curly brackets, node.author. Actually, let's do author. Well, we're doing email, so let's do email. Cool. So we'll save it. It recompiles. So let's go to the web page. Cool. There's all the emails as we expected, which is really neat. So we can also we can do limits in here. So if we go back to our playground, remember if we forget, we could see here, there's this sort by, order, per page, skip, page, and regex. So you can see you could probably do some indexing or some pagination, things like that. We won't worry about that, but let's say we only wanted to show like 5 of them. So we can put it right here in our query. This is all basic. This is all basic GraphQL. Let's say we only wanted 5. And then we refresh it. Now we only see 5 of them. Pretty neat. So let's see if we can add in an image. So if I put in an image tag, I'll just put a source here. Then I can grab let's make this source, and we'll put in curly brackets. Actually, we'll do item.node.avatar, and we know it's actually going to be source, like this. Let's see what happens when we do that. Cool, now we have pictures for everybody from this random faker library. So you see it's just as easy as that to grab information from our GraphQL and then display it on the page. So I want to show you guys one more thing. And let's say you don't want to use one of the plugins, but you just want to grab data from an external API. So that's really easy too. So I'm going to go to my grid site. I'm going to click new file, and I'm going to create a file called, let me try that again. New file, we're going to call it gridsome.server.js. Now in this file, file will start anytime the server starts. There's actually a client one too, but the server one is the one we want. And what we're going to do is we're going to install Axios. It's going to be our library that we're going to use. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new source and a new content type that'll show up in our GraphQL database. This is only loaded once when the server is created. So by the way, if we have data that's constantly changing from our place dynamically, then we would want to continue, and we were doing this, we would have to rebuild it every time to be able to get the new information in there. There's also ways where we can use hooks inside our components to grab information if we need dynamic information, but if we want it in the GraphQL database, we actually have to rebuild every time. So that is one slight problem, but let's go ahead and do this. So we do const Axios require, and then we require Axios, and then we're going to create a model export. So I'm going to just copy and paste this from another screen. And this gives access to the API, and the API has some cool things we can do with it. So first we want to do this API load source. So we can do API load source, and then we're going to do an async function because we're going to grab some information. And now since we have, and we'll go ahead and close this one, what we want to do is in this async load source, we're going to grab some stuff from an external address, and then we're going to store it into this new content type. So I'll show you how to do that. So first we're going to do some destructuring here. I'm going to take some data, and I'm going to await, and I'm going to use Axios to get some information. And a really cool website, if you haven't seen it, is JSON placeholder type code, and it's a way you can just grab some dummy data. I'm going to use this post, so I'm going to grab like 100 posts from it. So I'm going to copy and paste this address, and there it is. So if you look here at the website and click post, you can see this is the data it returns. You get a user ID, title, body. I'm not worrying about any authentication or anything, which is perfect. And so now we have this data here. So now we can use this. We're going to create a new variable called content type, and then I'm going to store this I'm going to use add content type, and that's going to take an object here. And this store, basically this store that we're going to be using is how we're going to feed data into our GraphQL database. So what we want to do is we're going to create a new type name. We're going to call it blog post. And then we're going to route it. We have to put where we want these to show up. And we're going to use some templates in a second. So we're going to create a route called blog slug. Now, if we want to just make sure it's working, we can do a console log data. I'm going to save it. And if I restart the server, you should see here, let's make sure it works. Okay, you can see here, it's all the data, all 100 blog posts have downloaded with the title, body, and user ID, which is perfect. That's what we want. So we'll stop it again. But what we want to do is we want to actually add that somewhere. So I'm going to just leave that there for now. So I'm going to create basically a for loop here with the data that's being returned. And first, I want to create a path. So we want a path that has to match. So this is kind of a weird quirk that I found out, is that when I add this content to the GraphQL, it expects a path. We can use that path to actually, it has to match this path we specified up here. Otherwise, we won't be able to access this data if we were trying to use something like templates, which I'm going to explain in a second. So bear with me. So I'm going to create a blog here, and then I'm going to create item.id, because we know from that it comes with an ID, which is 99. It also has a title and a body. So I'm going to just take the path is going to be blog like 1, blog/2, blog/3. So that'll work for us. And then, so I'm going to use this content type that we created earlier, and we're going to add node for it. And so we're going to create an ID, which is going to be the item.id. We're going to create a title, which is item.title. And then we're going to create a path. Now this is going to be like this, but since we're using S6, we could just go like this with path. And then we want to add some custom fields. So you can't just add in every single field you want under here. All you really get is ID, title, and path. It might be one more. But if you want to add any additional fields, you want to add this fields array. And so I want a special one called body. And that is all I'm going to add in here. So this should create a new node, and we could check to see if it works. So we're going to save it all. And I'm going to run my development server and see if I see any errors. And it looks like we do have an error because I fat-fingered this. We want to do this because we're using string interpolation. And I'm going to start it again. It says item is not defined. So we'll get to delete that. And we'll try it again. And this should build this time. Cool, it built. So let's look at our Graph Explorer. I'm going to refresh it. And you can see now in our schema that we now have all blog posts, which is perfect. And now we can use that. So cool. Let's try all blog posts first. So I'm going to delete out the figure data and do all blog post. And then inside there, I can do edges again, node, and now I can grab information. So let's grab titles, and let's see if our paths look okay. So to do that, cool. So we have titles. We can see our path /blog/100. So this looks good. So it looks like it pulled in everything in from the API and put everything into our GraphQL database. Sweet. So now what we want to do is we want to create a template. And so what I mean by that is we want people, this is going to be a blog now. So we want people to go to /blog/1/blog/2 and then have its own template, and it has its own information it can pull up from it. So that shouldn't be too hard. So what we want to do is we created this, we called it blog post. So we want to make sure we create something in the templates. Now, if you click the README there, it says this is the GraphQL collection. So we're in the right place here. So if you have a collection, you can create a template for it. So I'm going to create a template. We're going to call it blog post.view. And it's going to be like kind of a normal template. So we're going to have template. We're going to leave we're going to create a layout for it too. Let's see here. Layout. And we're going to close it with a closing bracket. We're going to try to make it look okay. And then we can have a, I don't know, H2 title and H3. What did we say here? We have a path and we have, let's see, we wanted to look at our body, which was one of our custom fields. So we'll have something for body as well. Body. Oops. Body. And so we'll add it in there. So now what we could do, and by the way, we'd normally, after this, we would have a script tag right here with our export default, and this is where we would put in information, like we can put in our meta info. This is where we can put in our like title for the page. I don't know, title. Don't worry about that right now. So now we need to grab information out. So let's go back to our Explorer here and let's try something different. So what we want to do is we can actually type in our query here, make sure it works, and then we can add it to our template. So what we have to do this, it looks a little different. We're going to do blog post, and then we're going to create a path, and this is going to be a string. And then we need to create a post, and we're going to call it blog post. This is our blog post query, and it's going to say push in the path, which is a variable we're going to create in a second, and then let's try to take out the title and body of that. If you can see, that's how it looks like. So you're probably thinking, well, what is this path variable and how do I look at it? Oops. So we can, if we go to query variables down here, we can actually create new variables. So we're going to create a path variable. Remember in GraphQL, you always do double quotes, not single quotes. That's very important. So we need to do /blog/1. That might be, I don't know, one of our blog paths. So what this is saying is we're going to look at our blog post, which is the new content type that we created. We're going to have a path, which is going to be a variable that's passed into it. We're going to look at this. We're going to create basically this post here. And from the post, we're going to match it up to our blog post. And then we're going to retrieve the title and body. So if we click here, it worked. So we have our data here. We now have data.post, and then we have a title. And so it pulled up the one for number 1. So this is the query we're going to use. So I'm going to copy it. Now, if you don't understand this query, it's a little confusing. I would look at the GraphQL documentation. I had to do it at first. It wasn't 100% making sense to me, but it does after you look at it for a while. So we're going to do the same page query we did before, like we did on our About page. And then we're going to copy and paste what we have in here. So we're going to save it. And just for good measure, I'm going to stop and restart the site. And we're going to see here under our title if we can see it. So to access it, we do double curly brackets. We do the $page. We made it post title. And then right here, we're going to do $page.post.body. Save it again. So we'll go back to our site. We're going to refresh it. Still looks the same. But this time we're going to put in the path that we put in. If you remember, we go back to the Gridsome server and we put this route /blog/slug. And this slug will equal the path, basically that number that we had in here, this path. So let's see if that works. So we're going to do /blog/5. Cool. So we got our title here, and then the body. Now, if you're saying, well, is this what's really in it? Let's go back to our Graph Explorer and look at number 5. So we go to playground. So we change our query variable to 5. Okay, NES Sync Audio. This is also basically just lorem ipsum, if you guys don't know. Yep, that's the same. So basically, we just created from the GraphQL database using a template. Using a template, we just created a really simple blog right here. Now we could, if we wanted to, like on our homepage, we can use links. You could see here for links, if we look like at the layouts. By the way it works, there's a good graph here in the documentation, but basically layouts is like you can have different layouts for different parts of different components in your app. Pages are a way you can actually create your different routes in your app. So if I created Erik.view, then you can go to /Erik, and that would work. And then templates is what you use to create with the GraphQL collections. So that's all the 3 differences there. That's really quick. And then you can also have components that you can import into any of these. So you can like reuse them in different layouts and different pages. But so you could, like let's see here, the default view, there's this G-link. So this is the type of linking that you can do in here. So I could have another link to name. So this is linking to the name of it, but you can do different 2 links, I believe. So if I want to do blog post 1, so instead of this about, you could just make it, you can just do something like this. You can do blog/1, and then we refresh it, then you click on it, and it actually goes to it. So you can see here, click blog +1. Now it's actually pulling it out of the GraphQL database. So that's a quick introduction to Gridsome. That was a lot of information. I hope you guys learned a lot. If you guys like this, let me know in the comments below. I can do even more videos on this. I think it's pretty new. I think some things are going to change about it, but I think this is a good start. Let me know in the comments below what you like that, and please click that like and subscribe. Thanks.